Welcome to According to Sam, folks, episode 321. Hope you guys have had a great week this week. I have a lot to share with you guys today. We're going to get into talking about some politics. And like I said, I have a lot to share with you guys. So let's get right into it. I want to recap the No Kings process or the No Kings protest from last weekend. And talk about that a little bit. Huge crowds. And I finished up last podcast talking about this a little bit, that you did see huge crowds for this No Kings protest across the nation last weekend. That shouldn't surprise anyone. There were over 200 NGOs and groups and organizations that organized this event. Big money behind this event, like the heiress of billionaire heiress of Walmart, helped, support this thing and get she sponsored the New York Times ads and who knows what other money, she put into this event, along with other billionaires. It's really interesting that Democrats are against oligarchs unless the oligarchs are funding their movement. So this wasn't a grassroots movement. This was well organized by NGOs, big money, and they did draw big crowds. This is the crowd you're looking at here. This is in Boise, Idaho. A lot of people there. This video, this is in San Diego, here where I live. Major crowds here in San Diego. They were saying that this was 20,000 people. I saw some estimates of even higher, but those are seas of people that came from all over the county. Some of them probably came from over the border. But major crowds here in San Diego. This is Minnesota, St. Paul. Major crowds there. Big crowds. Los Angeles, seas of people in Los Angeles. I'm not sure where this one is here, but tons of people for the No Kings protest. They said that they estimated 5 million people came out to protest last weekend. 5 million people. 5 million people. Okay, it's a lot of people. Trump got 77 million votes in the last election. Some of these people should have shown up to the polls. And so the point that I'm trying to make, and that I started making at the end of last podcast, is that, yes, you saw these major crowds. This was a well-funded, well-organized event, but it doesn't mean that there is a resurgence of the Democratic Party, that the Democratic Party and the opposition to Trump is, so great. Because it's not, and we're going to get into that here in a moment. This article came out in Daily Beast. No Kings was the biggest protest in U.S. history, data analysts. And then, read this first sentence here. It says, the No Kings protest in every state may have been the biggest day of demonstrations in American history, data analysts suggest. So the data analysts are suggesting that the No Kings protest was the biggest protest in American history. It wasn't the biggest protest in American history, but it was about 5 million people, between 5 and 6 million people is what they say. Huge protests, shouldn't surprise anyone. Well funded, well organized. But the biggest protest in American history is actually the February 15th, 2003 anti-war protest. This was a protest that took place as we were building up to the invasion of Iraq in 2003. This protest happened in February of 2003. A month after this protest is when the Iraq invasion started. And this is when Democrats were against war. This was when, most of this protest in the United States, and the thing about this protest is that this was the largest world protest in America, or in world history, not only in American history, in world history. This protest on February 15, 2003, was millions of people in every major city in the world, all over Europe, all over Asia, all over South America, here in the United States, in Canada, in Mexico. This is the hugest protest, the largest protest in world history, and it was also the largest protest in American history. On February 15, 2003, a coordinated day of protest was held across the world in which people from more than 600 cities expressed opposition to the imminent Iraq war. It was part of a series of protests and political events. There was tons of protests that were going on as the buildup to war was going on there in 2003, but this one was the largest. And there was, again, major protests throughout. And this is very interesting too, because I mean, a lot of people are relating what's going on right now with the potential conflict with Iran. There is factions that are breaking out in the Republican Party, and people criticizing Trump that he ran on being a peace candidate, and now he's potentially taking us to war. And people are drawing similarities, trying to draw similarities. They're very few, and we're not going to get into this in this podcast, but I have a future podcast plan where we're going to get into the build up to the war in Iraq, and we'll see what happens with this situation with Iran. Hopefully, cooler heads prevail. But the situation and that was going on in 2002, 2003, as we were building up to and getting ready to invade Iraq, and what Bush was doing and what Trump is now doing, completely different. There are very few parallels, and people are trying to draw parallels. But anyway, this was the largest protest in American history, in world history, on February 15, 2003. If you go here, talks about the United States. Protests took place. This is just the United States. Protests took place all across the United States of America, with CBS reporting 150 U.S. cities had protests. According to the World Socialist website, protests took place in 225 different communities across the United States. This was larger than No Kings. The largest protests took place in the nation's largest cities, including Chicago, Los Angeles, New York. But there were similar protests in smaller towns like Gainesville, these other areas in Illinois, in Alaska, Juneau. So this was the largest protest in American history and in world history, was in opposition to the Iraq war, which, after this huge protest on this day, Bush was asked about the protest in a press conference. And he says, well, you see major protests like this, it shows that people don't understand that Saddam is a problem. That's what he says. That people don't understand that Saddam's a problem, and we will deal with him. Because Bush was going to take us to war in Iraq no matter what. Very different from Trump. Very different from what Trump is signaling and talking about, and trying to negotiate a deal with Iran, and to get Iran to enter into a new deal, a nuclear deal, to stop enriching uranium. This is some footage from the 2003, February 15, 2003 protests. This is in front of the Capitol in D.C. Major protests, huge amounts of people. That was in England. This is in New York. So this was the largest protest in American history. And again, this is a tweet that Alex Jones put out, what you voted for. And then they show a AI image of Trump's face morphed with Bush's face. Like people are trying to make parallels and calling Trump Bush now because of this aggressive tone and what is happening with Iran. Israel has already bombed some facilities there in Iran, but I mean, Israel has, had assassination attempts on Iran's nuclear scientists before. They've attacked Iran before. I mean, that is something that is not new. Israel attacking the nuclear scientists and the nuclear program that they have there in Iran. And Trump's trying to negotiate a deal. Like I said, this is not I don't want to get into this in this podcast. We'll see what happens. I hope cooler heads prevail, but we're going to get into talking about Iraq and how much different Iraq is and to the situation. It's different from the situation that we're currently facing with Iran. A lot of the same players. I understand Netanyahu was there back in 2003. He was the one, cheerleading us into the war in Iraq and saying that Saddam had nuclear weapons when he didn't. But there's some significant differences. The IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency that is associated with the UN, has said that Iran has enriched uranium to 60%. But not only have they enriched it to 60%, in February, they were at 30%. So in 4 months, they've gone from 30% to 60%. And they need to get to 90% before they're at weapons grade. Now, they're saying that they don't have a weapons program. Okay, they don't have a weapons program. But once they're at 90% weapons grade, and they have the fissile material, how fast do they need to turn on the capabilities to build a weapon at that point? I mean, they're moving pretty fast. That's the point that I'm making. And that information is not coming only from Israel. That's coming from the UN, IAEA, which is totally different from what was going on in 2003. I mean, I'm getting off of a tangent and I didn't mean to go here, but let me just explain to you that the IAEA was in Iraq in 2003. That Saddam had the IAEA in Iraq searching for a nuclear program, and just days before Bush drops the bombs to start the war in Iraq, the head of the IAEA, Mohammed El-Bardi, testified that they had been searching all over Iraq, and they've been testing isotopes, and they had been looking for radioactive activity. They've been looking for everything. And El-Bardi testified just days before Bush dropped the bombs that we have to this date seen no evidence that Iraq has reconstituted their nuclear program. And then he asked for more time. There was no reason that Bush couldn't have given him more time to make final conclusions. Bush did not want him to make final conclusions. Totally different situation than the IAEA now in today saying, look, Iran's not letting us search certain sites. And we know for a fact that they were at 30% enrichment in February, and now they're at 60%. So they're enriching it pretty fast. That's different from what went on with Bush. Bush was lying to the United Nations Security Council. Bush sent Colin Powell to the United Nations Security Council to lie to them. Trump's not lying. Trump's getting his information from the UN, from the IAEA. Now there's some conflicting information about, what U.S. intelligence is saying, and we'll get into this later, but there should be everyone's talking about this week how there's factions in MAGA, and MAGA is split on this issue of Iran, and there's all this infighting going on. Mark Levin, Tucker Carlson, others that are at odds because of this issue with Iran, and that shouldn't surprise anyone. This goes back to the study from 2003 that I told you about in the last podcast, and this viral post that went out this last week about this 2003 study. There is more diversity of thought on the political right than the political left. And this guy asks, how's this happen? But it's true that it shouldn't surprise anyone that there's these factions and that there's this conflict going on in the right because there's more diversity of thought. So the left doesn't have any diversity of thought. The left is more cultish, is the point that I was trying to make at the end of the last podcast. When in 2003, when the anti-war protests were going on, most of the people that were protesting and leading up all the way until 2008, when Bush is out of office and we're electing Barack Obama, who runs against the war. He runs as a peace candidate, just like Trump, how he's going to end the war in Afghanistan, end the war in Iraq, and that it was, very misguided to get us in that war. All the Democrats, all the people on the left were, yay, Obama, we're against the war. We want you to come and save us from all the war. And then Obama comes in and he starts executing different wars and starting the war in Libya. He starts the war in Syria and arms ISIS in Syria. He sends more troops to Afghanistan when he runs in 2008 that he's going to end the war in Afghanistan. He sends more troops to Afghanistan, keeps the war in Afghanistan going. And the people who were protesting Bush and his, very aggressive foreign policy, those same people, they looked and they turned a blind eye when Obama started doing it because Obama was doing it. So the war was good because the black guy was doing it. The war was bad when the white guy was doing it, but the war was good when the black guy was doing it. So there's very little diversity of thought on the left. They're more cultish, but they told you that the right was cultish. No, the right's not cultish. The right has more diversity of thought. There's more debate about the direction that the country should be going, the direction that the Republican Party should be going. There's more diversity over here on the right. Trump is not our king. We don't think Trump is a king. Maybe you guys think Trump is a king, but we don't think Trump is a king. It's so interesting. I think about the COVID vaccine all the time, and that Trump is the one who did warp speed. He got the COVID vaccine out, but the majority of people who didn't take the vaccine, like myself, are people on the right. And then Trump came out and he says, yeah, you should take it. You should take it. If we were in a cult, if Obama came out and said, which he did, Obama came out and said, you should take the vaccine. And most of the people who took the vaccine are right here on the left with the very narrow, mindset and worldview. Obama came out and said, take the vaccine. Clinton, Bush, they came out and said, and all the Democrats said, okay. On the right, where there's more diversity of thought, people, even though they voted for Trump, like myself, 3 times voted for Trump. I support Trump. When he said, take the vaccine, I'm like, nah, I'm not taking the vaccine. Nah, Trump, I love you, guy, but nah, I'm not taking that. So it shouldn't surprise anyone that now that we are in this potential conflict with Iran, that there's a lot of people on the right who don't want, any attacks on Iran, don't want us to get involved at all, don't believe that there should be a regime change in Tehran. And then there's others on the right who believe that we should take an active role, that we should get rid of the regime if possible. So, again, it shouldn't surprise anyone that there is that very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very passionate debate going on in the Republican Party within MAGA over this foreign policy. And we're going to get back into this, and we're going to talk about Iraq and what happened in Iraq. We finally passed $37 trillion. So we're on our way now to $38 trillion in debt. And we'll see how fast we get there. We passed $37 trillion, first day of summer, 2025. So let's see how fast it takes us to get to 38 trillion. And I'm going to get back into telling you the story of how we amassed this debt. And, when I get back into telling you how to amass this debt, that's when we will tell the story about, 9/11. And what happened post 9/11 and, the build up to take us to war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan and the war on terrorism, because, this $37 trillion in debt and how we went from being a country that was, had a budget surplus. We were predicting that we were going to pay off all of the debt, the entire national debt in 10 years, how we went from that to now $37 trillion. You have to understand the foreign policy of the Bush administration that took place in the first part of the 21st century. So major protests all over the weekend at the No Kings protest. And, it would make you think, oh my God, major crowds. They had these major crowds all over the country. I mean, never mind that, Kamala Harris lost 7 of 7 swing states. She lost the popular vote. You're going to see here, the approval rating of the Democratic Party is in the dumps. Trump's approval rating, average approval rating right now is 46.4%. And I like to look at the average because, any single poll you have to take with a grain of salt. There was a poll saying Kamala Harris is going to win Iowa by like 4 points before the election in November. She lost Iowa. She lost every swing state. She lost the popular vote. She lost everything. So I take polls with a grain of salt, but I like to look at an average of polls. That's why I come to Real Clear Politics. Looks like we got about 12 polls here that they're giving you an average of 46.4%. 51% disapprove, 41.4% approve. If you look down here, this Quinnipiac poll has Trump's approval rating at 38%. This is one of the lowest polls. It is the lowest poll, 38%. In this average, Quinnipiac has him at 38%. So that's bringing down the average. And this Quinnipiac poll is an outlier. Look at this. Rasmussen, approval, 52%. Insider, Advantage, approval, 54%. Fox News, 46%. Economist, YouGov, 44%. Morning Consult, 46%. RMG Research, 53%. So you got 1, 2, 3 polls that got him over 50%. And then another 5 or so that are over the average. How many do we have below the average? 1, 2, 3, 4. Only 4 polls of like 12 here that are below the average. So Trump's doing pretty good. That's the point that I want to make. Trump's doing pretty good as far as his approval rating. He's below 50%. He's not that far below 50%. And it doesn't matter how many crowds you had all over the country last weekend. Trump's doing pretty good. He's doing a lot better than the Democratic Party, I tell you that. This is the Republican Party right here. These polls are a little bit old. It goes to March 6th through May 15th. So we haven't had anything more current than May. But Republican Party back in May is at 42% favorability. So they're a little bit under Trump at 42%. Trump's at 46%. But look at Democrats, the Democratic Party. And again, these polls are a little bit old, but Democratic Party's at average 34.7%. Their lowest approval on of all these polls is 27%, the Democratic Party. So the Democratic Party's not doing better than the Republican Party. Republican Party's polling on average ahead of the Democratic Party. Trump is polling ahead of the Democratic Party on average. So the point that I'm making is it doesn't matter how many people they got out in the streets last weekend in this highly organized, well-funded AstroTurf protest that they did last weekend. It doesn't matter. The Democratic Party is in serious, serious trouble right now. Serious trouble. I want you to listen to Steve Kornacki here.
Then there's the standing of the two parties here. They look about the same, 44.
This is one poll. These numbers are different from the averages I was just showing you. But in this one poll,
54% call it a success. 56% say it was a failure or a partial failure.
In this one poll that this NBC poll that Kornacki is talking about, Republicans are at 44% favorability and Democrats are at 43% favorability. So this is some new polling. Maybe the Democrats' numbers are ticking up. But listen to what Kornacki says here.
Then there's the standing of the two parties here. They look about the same. 44 favorable for Republicans, 43 for Democrats. What's interesting here, Kristen, is in Trump's first term, when we were taking polls of the two parties, the Democrats were consistently more popular than the Republicans. And it was an advantage that Democrats had heading into those first Trump midterms. You could see.
Listen to what he's saying. Listen to what he's saying. That in Trump's first administration, as you're heading into the 2018 midterms, that the Democrats in all of the polling were consistently polling ahead of the Republican Party as you're heading into those midterms. And there's a reason why. It's because of the Mueller investigation. You have to understand that the reason that was the thing that was driving the Democrats' popularity as you're moving in those 2018 midterms was the Mueller investigation, was the nightly coverage of Trump is a Russian agent. Trump worked with Russia to rig the election, to steal it from Hillary Clinton. That was the narrative going on night after night. Rachel Maddow, every single news agency reporting on the Mueller investigation. And that was driving the Democrats being ahead of the Republican Party, for all the polling going into the midterms. Right now, the Republican Party going into the midterms next year, the Republican Party is polling ahead of the Democratic Party. They're in no better position to win back the House of Representatives and the Senate next year at all, unless they can come up with a big scandal like the Mueller investigation. They can forget it. On the economy, this is just a few weeks ago, CNN pollster. Take a listen.
Yeah, you would think after all of the waves, Kate Baldwin, after the last few months, the first 5 months of the Donald Trump presidency, right, the first 4 months of the Donald Trump presidency, that you expect that Democrats would have this massive lead on the economy. It ain't so. It ain't so. The party that is closest to your economic views, in November of 2023, it was the Republicans by 11 points. Now it's still within that range, still within that margin of error. Plus 8-point advantage for the Republican Party. How is that possible, Democrats? How is that possible after all the recession fears, after the stock market's been doing all of the...
How's that possible?
...that Americans are against, and Republicans still hold an 8-point lead on the economy? Are you kidding me?
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? How is that possible? Look at this. Look at this. The direction of the country. It's an average. Right track, wrong track, the direction of the country. Now, 42.6% on average, and the latest poll that came out is June 16th. So this was just a few weeks ago. This is some more current polling. Right track, that the country is headed in the right track. 42.6% of the country says that the country's headed in the right track. That's just 4 points under what Donald Trump's approval rating is. This is the same favorability that the Republican Party has, 42%. Doesn't seem like a lot. It's under 50%. But look at where it was when Biden was president. Look at what this has done. So this is in the middle of Biden's presidency in July of 2022. the wrong track. The average for the wrong track, the people that said that the country is on the wrong track in July of 2022, in the middle of Joe Biden's term, 4 years, was almost 75%, almost 3 in 4 Americans say that the country is on the wrong track. Look what's happened here. Look at look at this, people. Look at this. More and more people under the Trump administration are saying that the country is on the right track. Look at what this chart is doing. That, yeah, this isn't, 42.6% isn't great, but look at the trend here. Look at the trend. More people are saying that the country's on the right track under Donald Trump, people. And the Democrat Party has serious, serious problems. This article came out in the New York Times this week. And, the Democratic Party is in bad shape, people. And I don't care how many people they got in the streets for some, well-organized, well-funded AstroTurf campaign over last weekend, where they got millions of unhappy Kamala Harris voters out in the streets. It doesn't mean anything. Democratic Party is in trouble, in some serious trouble. The DNC is in chaos and desperate for cash. And this is their new leader. This is the leader of the Democratic Party right now. This guy, he just was elected to be the new chair of the DNC, Ken Martin from Minnesota. And the DNC is in chaos is the headline, and desperate for cash. I have this clip from Chris Salissa, and he breaks down that New York Times article. I want you to take a listen.
The Democratic National Committee, the big party organization for Democrats, is in absolutely dire shape. And I think it's probably time for the guy who chairs it, a guy named Ken Martin, to go. Let me explain. So
it's time for Ken Martin to go. Ken Martin just got there, Chris. Ken Martin was just elected just a few months ago, and you're already saying it's time for him to go?
Dire shape. And I think it's probably time for the guy who chairs it, a guy named Ken Martin, to go. Let me explain.
This guy.
There's a piece in the New York Times on Wednesday night. I'm just going to read you the first 2 paragraphs because they are devastating. Just months into the tenure of a new party leader, Ken Martin, the Democratic National Committee's financial situation has grown so bleak that top officials have discussed whether they might need to borrow money this year to keep paying the bills. Second paragraph. Fundraising for major donors.
They can't keep the lights on at the DNC. They're having trouble keeping the lights on at the DNC, people. And they got 5 million people marching out in the streets last weekend. And they want you to believe there's some huge resurgence of the Democratic Party and that they're in good shape. They can't keep the lights on at the DNC, people. What's going on here?
Just months into the tenure of a new party leader, Ken Martin, the Democratic National Committee's financial situation has grown so bleak that top officials have discussed whether they might need to borrow money this year to keep paying the bills. Second paragraph. Fundraising for major donors, some of whom Mr. Martin has still not spoken with, has slowed sharply. Now, folks, I've been talking about this, right? So Ken Martin gets elected DNC chair. David Hogg, activist who was a high school student.
They voted out David Hogg finally last week. I thought they had already done it, but they ended up making it official. David Hogg's out. He's not the vice chair anymore. So we're going to talk about this if I have time to get to it at the end of this podcast. We're going to talk more about David Hogg. If not, we'll pick that up on Monday, talking about David Hogg. But you remember David Hogg started the Leaders We Deserve PAC, and he was going to use $20 million that he raised through that PAC to primary Democrats in safe districts to get some fresh blood. And they say that's not the reason that they voted him out. They voted him out because he's a man and not a woman. And people were like, well, why don't you just identify as a woman? That's what you guys do. But they voted him out. He's gone, so he's got plenty of time to focus. And that's a major issue. You have to understand that, because that has a lot to do with this disarray that the Democrats are in. And that's Chris Alissa's title here. Democrats in disarray. They're in disarray. They don't have any money to keep the lights on. They're polling at 34% on average. I mean, they have major problems over there. They have no leadership. And the guy who is their leader can't keep the lights on. Major problems. But yeah, they got 5 million people out in the streets.
That's right. So Ken Martin gets elected DNC chair. David Hogg, activist who was a high school student at Parkland in 2018 when there was a mass school shooting there, gets elected vice chairman. It doesn't work. Hogg doesn't want to play nice. Martin and Hogg clearly don't really get along. Hogg is ousted last week. Okay, you might have thought that would be the end of it. Okay, Martin can move on, and now they can get the DNC on the right track. No. Two big labor leaders left the DNC because Martin would not put them on the Rules and Bylaws Committee. There are so many quotes in this piece, this New York Times piece, some on the record that are just devastating about Martin and who he's including and who he's not including. He's playing favorites. But ultimately what this gets down to is money, right? The answer to all your questions is money. These party committees work on money. They are funding the turnout operations, the voter ID operations for most of the state parties around the country. This is how these state parties, who are trying to win Senate races, trying to win House races, this is how they get a bunch of their money. And when you have a national party committee that is thinking about borrowing money to cover its bills, I've literally never heard of that before, and I'm old. I've been covering this a long time.
Yeah, I've never heard of that before either. It doesn't sound like the Democratic Party is in great shape. Yeah, they got 5 million people out in the streets. They got 20 million people out in the streets here in San Diego. They can't keep their lights on at the DNC. What's going on here? So Jasmine Crockett, who is a rising star in the Democratic Party, she did a interview with Katie Couric this week. And they start talking about what's going on with the Democratic Party, the problems in the Democratic Party. They talk about Joe Biden, talk about the fact that Jasmine Crockett was against Joe Biden dropping out of the 2024 election, that she supported him staying in the election. So they get into a little bit of that. I want you to listen to what they say.
I kept saying we stand by Joe Biden because he has a record to run on. Now, whether or not we were getting out there and communicating effectively about that record, I say we didn't.
We didn't. So this is what the running line is with everybody in the Democratic Party. It's not what we stand for. It's not our policies and the agenda that we put forth. It's not that. It's our messaging. That the problem is our communications. And our messaging. We didn't effectively get the message out about how great Joe Biden's 4 years were. That's what she's saying, is that it's a messaging problem. It's not a problem with our agenda. It's not a problem with our platform. It's not a problem who we are and what we stand for. It's a problem with our messaging. And you hear that over and over again. This is their delusion that it's communications. It's the messaging. We just got to figure out an effective way to communicate our platform and our agenda to the American people. We don't need to change it. We need to just figure out a creative way to communicate it differently to the American people. That's what she's saying.
We stand by Joe Biden because he has a record to run on. Now, whether or not we were getting out there and communicating effectively about that record, I say we didn't. And I say that it had to be a team sport. It couldn't just be that, we were relying on the president to get all the information out. It was incumbent upon us. We were supposed to go into our districts with these big fake checks and make sure all the local media was there. And we talk about the investments that were being made and make sure that they knew Joe Biden did this. That new facility, Joe Biden did that. Like, it was up to us to really be good partners.
And you don't think Democrats were?
I don't think that we were. Instead, if we spent half as much time beating down Joe Biden as we did uplifting all that was accomplished, and it got accomplished in only 2 years because he only had the House and the Senate for 2 years.
You people spent you people passed $3 trillion in stimulus in those first 2 years by yourselves without a single Republican vote. You passed $3 trillion in stimulus in those first 2 years, lady.
Uplifting all that was accomplished, and it got accomplished in only 2 years because he only had the House and the Senate for 2 years. Ultimately, when the history books are written, he will go down as a very accomplished president, as one of our best presidents.
She's talking about Biden.
But if people don't know, if we're not communicating, then it's almost like we didn't do anything. And
it's a communication problem again. That's the message. Not only from her, you can tell that they've had tons of meetings about this and talked about this. The New York Times article from a couple of weeks ago about them spending, what was it, $20 million to figure out how to communicate to men. It's a communication problem, not a platform problem, not an agenda problem. It's a communication problem.
People don't know, if we're not communicating, then it's almost like we didn't do anything. And I still think that we are struggling with figuring out how to communicate out to the general public.
Let me ask you about the Democratic Party, because obviously it has gotten tons of criticism, and you're saying the Democrats should have supported Joe Biden. But I think many Americans feel like the Democratic Party is lost, feckless, cannot get their shit together, to be just to say it, real. What do you think the Democratic Party needs to do to reinvigorate itself, to have a leader, to have some organizing principle?
Yeah.
What can we do? Katie Couric's so frustrated. Oh my God, what can we do? We're not perceived well by the public. Our approval ratings at 34%. We have no money to keep the lights on. We are in dire straits here. What can we do, Jasmine Crockett, as a rising star in the Democratic Party? What do we need to do to get the Democratic Party on the right track? Listen to her answer.
First of all, I think we need to rebrand.
We need to rebrand.
We've never invested in branding. I can't really tell you what our brand is.
I'll tell you what your brand is. Jay Johnson on Meet the Press 2 weeks ago said what the brand is. The brand is identity politics, open borders, and political correctness. That's what Jay Johnson said. Jay Johnson said that on Meet the Press 2 weeks ago, that's your brand. Identity politics, open borders, and political correctness. And she says, I don't know what our brand is, but we need to rebrand.
To have a leader, to have some organizing principle.
Yeah. So first of all, I think we need to rebrand. I don't know that we've ever invested in branding. I can't really tell you what our...
I don't know that we've ever invested in branding. Lady, your brand is who you are. You can't rebrand unless you change, unless you make, real structural changes to your party, and then you can rebrand the party. But you can't stay the same and then just rebrand. Your brand is who you are.
To have some organizing principle.
Yeah. So first of all, I think we need to rebrand. I don't know that we've ever invested in branding. I can't really tell you what our brand is. Well, I know
it's diverse, and maybe that's part of the problem, right?
It's diverse. She's Katie Couric, the intellectual. Remember when she said that on the Bill Maher podcast, that they hate us because we're so intellectual. She says that the brand is the reason that you can't identify with the brand is because the brand is diverse. No, you people are not diverse. You people are very narrow in your thinking. The brand is who you are. There's no, diverse brand. The brand is who you are. The brand is how you perceive.
Reinvigorate itself, to have a leader, to have some organizing principle.
Yeah. So first of all, I think we need to rebrand. I don't know that we've ever invested in branding. I can't really tell you what our brand is. Well, I know
it's diverse, and maybe that's part of the problem, right?
It is.
It doesn't speak with one voice. There are a lot of different voices.
You guys speak with one
which
voice,
isn't
lady.
Bad.
No, I think that it's actually.
Who are you kidding? Who are you kidding? You speak with one voice. You people are a cult.
Maybe that's part of the problem, right?
It is.
It doesn't speak with one voice. There are a lot of different voices.
It is.
Which isn't necessarily bad.
No, I think that is actually one of our strengths. But I do think that the Republicans have branded us as weak.
The Republicans have branded us as weak. The Republicans have branded us as weak. So she's blaming the Republicans for branding them as weak. That the reason that the American people see us as weak and feckless is not because we're weak and feckless. That's because the Republicans have projected that upon us, is what she's saying.
Necessarily bad.
No, I think that is actually one of our strengths. But I do think that the Republicans have branded us as weak, right? That, I mean, when people, like you said, feckless, right? Like, I mean, we've been branded as weak. And I think when people are looking for leadership, you don't ever, when you go through and you say, list the attributes of a leader, weak is not one of those attributes that anyone will ever list as a descriptor. So I think that number one, we have to brand ourselves as something other than we've been branded as elitist and weak. And I think that we have to be branded as strong as well as for everyone. Right?
So we've been branded as elitists because you guys think that you're elitist, not because you are elitist, but that's the way you perceive yourself. That's what you put off. That's what Katie Couric, when she was on the Bill Maher show, she put off that she was an elitist, and the reason that people don't like them is because they're jealous of her. So that's what you project. You project elitism, but it's a faux elitism. It's not real elitism. It's just the way you perceive yourself. You're snobs, basically. And weak, yes, weak, feckless. That's part of your brand. And then what Jay Johnson said a couple of weeks ago: open borders, identity, politics, and political correctness. That's your brand. Republicans didn't brand you with that. That's who you are, lady. That's who you are. So this is a conversation that Chuck Todd is having. What's this guy's name? I forget his name. Ruri Texera. And he's an author. He's written a lot about the problems that are going on with the Democratic Party. And he's having a discussion here with Chuck Todd on Chuck Todd's podcast. I want you to take a listen to this.
As Ken Martin famously put it, there's nothing wrong with, our message or whatever. We just didn't deliver it well enough.
So listen, he's saying that Ken Martin, the guy that can't keep the lights on at the DNC, Ruri is saying that he says what Jasmine Crockett says and what they all say, that we did not communicate the message correctly. It's not that the message is bad. It's not that the agenda is bad. It's not that the platform is bad. The problem is that we did not communicate it effectively, is what Ruri says here. Take a listen.
There's nothing wrong with, our message or whatever. We just didn't deliver it well enough. I mean, if you believe that,
it's always funny. I rarely meet a politician who doesn't believe they have a communications problem.
Right. So
they never actually think they have an issue.
It's all comms problems, and until and unless democratic entities like that start realizing it's not just a comms problem. People don't like us. They don't like what we stand for. They don't like a lot of the positions they associate with us. They don't believe we're going to bring change. So we have to really change that. We can't just stick with our message and the way we are and maybe go on more Fox News more often.
Now I want you to listen to what Ruri is saying. Ruri is saying something completely different from what you're hearing from Jasmine Crockett, what you're hearing from Ken Martin and these others that are saying that our message is good. Our platform is good. Our agenda is good. We just need to communicate it more effectively. Ruri says, no, that's not it. People don't like us. People don't like our message. People don't like our platform. It's not that it hasn't been communicated effectively. It's been communicated very effectively. We understand it. We just don't like it. They don't like us. They don't like our platform. They don't like our message. They don't like our agenda. That's what Ruri is saying. And until you change that, you're not going to be effective.
We're going to bring change. So we have to really change that. We can't just stick with our message and the way we are and maybe go on more Fox News more often, or talk to Joe Rogan. I mean, this is like classic comms strategy. Oh, the problem is we just didn't go out broadly enough to talk to the masses of honest workers and peasants about our great ideas. But what if they don't think your ideas are so great?
The ideas suck.
Isn't
the ideas suck.
Isn't there a lesson to be learned here from Trump in this?
And this is a very important part right here, Chuck Todd. Isn't there a lesson to be learned here from Trump? What's the lesson to be learned from Trump? as the Democratic Party tries to pull themselves out of this hole that they're in. There's a lesson learned from Trump, is what Chuck Todd says. Take a listen.
Well, isn't there a lesson to be learned from Trump? Isn't there a lesson to be learned here from Trump in this way? Trump realized that the Republican Party was unpopular, and he looked at two of the issues that made the Republican Party untrustworthy and unpopular over the last 20 years. The Iraq War and trying to trim entitlements. And what did he say? That's a stupid idea. I don't like
trade. Don't forget trade.
Yeah. And on trade. The sort of three issues where he went against his own, went against the Republican Party, and he did it in a primary, he sort of did it in bullying ways. He trashed Bush. And I remember when he first did it, you thought, should you do that in a Republican primary? Right? It seemed really risky. In hindsight, it seems genius.
It seems genius. In hindsight, it seems genius. Now, what is Chuck Todd talking about here? He says that in 2016, when Donald Trump, 2015, when he comes down the escalator and announces that he's running for president, the Republican brand was in the toilet. The same way the Democratic Party is in the toilet right now. The Democratic Party brand is in the toilet. Their messaging is in the toilet. That's where the Republican Party was in 2016. After Mitt Romney lost to Obama in 2012, the Republican Party issued an autopsy report. And I say this all the time. You don't issue autopsy reports on things that are living. You issue autopsy reports on things that are dead. And that's where the Republican Party was in 2015. It was dead. And who killed the brand of the Republican Party? It was George Bush. George Bush killed the brand of the Republican Party because the 8 years of George Bush were disastrous. They were disastrous. That's why it propelled this one-term senator from Illinois, some black guy with a funny name, to the presidency, because George Bush had so destroyed the Republican brand. It doesn't matter if it was John McCain, whoever would have gotten the Republican nomination in 2008, they were going to lose to the Democratic nominee, if it had been Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama. They were going to lose to the Democrat nominee because the Republican brand was in the toilet. So Chuck Todd says that when Donald Trump runs in 2016, he went straight at the guy who destroyed the Republican brand. He trashed George Bush because George Bush had destroyed the Republican brand. And that is what propelled Donald Trump up to prominence. And he ends up winning the nomination, ends up winning the presidency in 2016 because he went right at the guy. There were no sacred cows when Trump runs in 2016. Now, Chuck Todd says, well, when he does that, that it made people a little antsy. That are you allowed to go after a former Republican president and go directly at him and talk about how that former Republican president in a Republican primary so destroyed the Republican brand and brought harm to this country? And he says that looking at it when it was happening, when they go into that South Carolina debate, we're getting ready because this is what he's talking about. When they go into that South Carolina debate, Trump had already won New Hampshire. He'd come in second place in Iowa. He's on a roll. South Carolina is where he put the stops on. So they had come out, the media, everybody, they're trying to, because they wanted Jeb Bush. They were trying to run Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton. That's what the establishment wanted. And when they tried to trap Donald Trump in that debate and say that he said that George Bush should have been impeached for the Iraq War, and they try to put him on the spot, he says, yeah, he should have been impeached for the Iraq War. They lied us into the Iraq War. The Iraq War was a mistake. Chuck Todd says that seems like when it was happening, like that was a big mistake, but now it's genius. Listen to more of this.
That's a stupid idea. I don't like the party untrustworthy and unpopular over the last 20 years. The Iraq War and trying to trim entitlements. And what did he say? That's a stupid idea. I don't like
trade. Don't forget trade.
Yeah. And on trade, the sort of three issues where he went against his own, went against the Republican Party, and he did it in a primary, he sort of did it in bullying ways. He trashed Bush. And I remember when he first did it, you thought, should you do that in a Republican primary? Right? It seemed really risky. In hindsight, it seems genius.
Ingenious. So what he's saying is that we need someone. We're going to get into this here in a moment. I have a lot more time, but he says we need someone on the Democrats' side. That's the lesson to be learned, that we need someone on our side to go against the policies that have contributed to our branding issue. We need someone to come out and speak out against the previous administrations that have contributed to the party being where it is today. That's what he's saying. So he's talking about, well, he doesn't mention this guy, but we're going to talk about this guy here in a moment. But he's talking about this debate in South Carolina, and this is what Chuck Todd is making reference to. I want you to take a listen.
You said for the war. For the war. He lied. He got us into the war with lies. Do you still believe President Bush should have been impeached?
First of all, I have to say, as a businessman, I get along with everybody. I have business all over the world. I know so many of the people in the audience. And by the way, I'm a self-funder. I have my wife and I have my son. That's all I have. I don't have this. So let me just tell you, I get along with everybody, which is my obligation to my company, to myself, etc. Obviously, the war in Iraq was a big, fat mistake. Right?
They lied. It wasn't a mistake. They lied.
You want, and it took Jeb Bush, if you remember at the beginning of his announcement, when he announced for president, took him 5 days. He went back. It was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. Took him 5 days before his people told him what to say. And he ultimately said it was a mistake. The war in Iraq, we spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives. We don't even
spent
have
$5 trillion.
Iran is taking over Iraq with the second largest oil reserves in the world. Obviously, it was a mistake.
So
George Bush made a mistake.
He lied.
We make mistakes. But that one was a beauty. We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East.
But so you still.
So this is what Chuck Todd is talking about. Donald Trump, that's how he becomes the leader of the Republican Party. He goes directly at the guy who had destroyed the Republican brand. He goes directly at the policy that destroyed the Republican brand. And he does it in this debate in a primary in the DNC. And that is what propelled him to the leadership of the Republican Party and to where he is today. He went directly at the individual and the policy that had destroyed the Republican brand. I want you to listen to what Chuck Todd says here, as he's having this conversation. Listen again. This is very important.
Iraq war and trying to trim entitlements. And what did he say? That's a stupid idea. I don't like
trade. Don't forget trade.
Yeah. And on trade. The sort of three issues where he went against his own, went against the Republican Party, and he did it in a primary, he sort of did it in bullying ways. He trashed Bush. And I remember when he first did it, you thought, should you do that in a Republican primary? Right? It seemed really risky. In hindsight, it seems genius now, right? It would be like a Democrat running in a Democratic primary, just trashing, Biden and Clinton.
Just listen to what he says. Listen to what he says. It would be like a Democrat trashing Biden and Clinton. Who are you missing, buddy? You're just like skipping over someone. Biden and Clinton. He mentions the two white guys, but he leaves the long-legged Mac Daddy out. And no one is more responsible for where the Democrat brand is right now. No one's more responsible than the long-legged Mac Daddy, than this guy. That if someone's going to come out in the Democratic Party and do what Trump did in 2016 and go directly at the person and the policy that destroyed the Republican brand, going directly at George Bush, if a Democrat was going to do that, to imitate that and what Trump did and be propelled into leadership in the Democratic Party, they have to go directly at this guy, the long-legged Mac Daddy. They have to go directly at him. They have to go directly at his administration and his policy. You can't skip over Obama and just talk about Biden and Clinton. When I saw this, I laughed so hard. He just skips over Obama and says Biden and Clinton. It would be like a Democrat coming out and challenging Biden and Clinton. He doesn't mention Obama.
Trashed Bush. And I remember when he first did it, you thought, should you do that in a Republican primary? Right? It seemed really risky. In hindsight, it seems genius now, right? It would be like a Democrat running in a Democratic primary, just trashing, Biden and Clinton.
But not Obama. Just trashing Biden and Clinton, but not Obama. And the reason why, this is the reason why, because white liberals, they worship Obama. They worship Obama. They worship him like he's some type of deity. I mean, it's sacrilege. It would be blasphemy to challenge Obama the way Trump challenged Bush and went at Bush in 2016. And they're never going to do that. They're never going to do that because it has to do with identity politics, and it's a huge problem in the Democratic Party. I had so much left to share that I'm gonna have to pick up in the next podcast talking about the long-legged Mac Daddy. But the last clip that I want to play a clip because I keep calling Obama the long-legged Mac Daddy, and a lot of people don't understand or know where that comes from. The long-legged Mac Daddy is what Pastor Manning is James Manning is a preacher of a ministry out of New York. And this was some commentary that he gave 15 years ago during the Obama administration. And he's the one who coined the moniker long-legged Mac Daddy. Let's listen to Pastor Manning here.
Either there's going to be a revolution, Patrick Henry style here in America, where red-blooded, God-fearing, Jesus-loving Americans are going to stand up and say, we're not going to take it no more. We're just not going to take it. And there's going to be riots in the streets, worse than the riots in South Central Los Angeles after they acquitted the cops that beat up Rodney King. You think that and that was black people rioting. You haven't seen anything. And I'm not advocating killing and murder and stealing and robbing. That's not what I'm advocating. I'm just telling you what people are going to do. People are sick of this. People are tired of the long-legged Mac Daddy, kicking them in the face every time he gets up, lying to them. Then you got a bunch of, suck-ups like the MSNBC News, ABC News, and all these media types, and everybody who's looking to be popular and get invited to the White House, sucking up to him all the time. It's sickening. I mean, it's downright sickening to watch this. You can get these white folk all riled up here. I'm going to tell you something. They're going to come in, the white folk get riled up, members of the NRA going to come into the black neighborhoods. I'm telling you. People just tired of this. White people are being pushed around, kicked to the curb, having their rights denied, being called a racist, being walked on, watching their tax dollars go to fund all kind of drug sales, prostitution, illegal immigration. I mean, y'all gonna push these white folk till they can't take it no more. I'm telling you. You fool around here with Obama? You gonna let this long-legged Mac Daddy push these white folk? They gonna come up out of Tennessee and come up out of Oklahoma, come up out of Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, come up out of Oregon, and come out of Idaho, California.
So Pastor Manning is the one who first called him the long-legged Mac Daddy, and you cannot restore the Democratic Party unless you go directly at the long-legged Mac Daddy. We're going to pick up talking about the long-legged Mac Daddy in the next podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast, and I'll see you guys on Monday.